Like in Shrek, like the ogres and the onions. Similar. Peel it back layer by layer. Ogres have layers, and so do villains.
That's the moral of the story.
That's totally the moral of the story.
Hello and welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your Literary Hype Woman, and today's author conversation is a fun one because this author is just so fun. If you have not seen Nicole Maehrer on TikTok or Instagram, you should definitely check those out because those videos laid the foundation that became Assistant to the Villain, which was an instant New York Times bestseller. This is a fun, light fantasy read, especially if you love a little morally gray villain love interest in there. It's a great one. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Nicole Maehrer. Well, welcome to Literary Hype. It's so exciting to get to talk to you. This book has been huge. So for anyone who's been living under a rock and has not already seen Assistant to the Villain, tell us a little bit about what this book is.
You're so sweet. So Assistant to the Villain is basically like a fairy tale rom-com about a morally great fantasy villain's office, and specifically about his very sunshine, bubbly assistant who's like really his total counterpart, total opposite, trying to solve the mystery of who in the office is giving the villain away to the heroes. So that's the little mystery, romance, cozy fun.
Where did the spark for this story come from?
So originally, I've always loved fairy tales. I've always loved like incorporating humor into like everything. And one of my very favorite books and movies is The Princess Bride, which is, I think, such a great story because it has adventure, it has romance, it's funny and witty and very bouncy, and it kind of pulls all of those things together. And then it all just sort of came into fruition at once when I started doing TikTok videos of a skit series inspired by a morally great fantasy villain, and being his sunshine assistant, and basically would just like wander around my college townhome and and be like, sir, do you need me to like clean up the blood off the floor, and like very comedically. And I was so in love with the idea, and so many other people were so supportive and sweet and also seemed to really enjoy it. So I sat down to write the book, and it was the easiest thing I've ever written because it was so much fun, and it's like my comfort story. So yeah, that's sort of how it all came to be.
What's it like for you as an author to come up in the age of TikTok and social media, and how important that is to selling books at this point?
Oh my gosh, it's great. And it's such a creative way to make like really great connections. I feel like I've been very, very lucky, and I've met so many amazing other authors. Like half the fun for me is I get to make friends with like other authors that I really, really admire, and I get like beside myself talking to because they're so cool and they write so well. So it's really amazing. I feel like I've made some amazing connections. I get to interact with like directly with my readers, which is really cool. So it's just all around, I think it's been wonderful.
So something I noticed, and I want to know if it was intentional. So you named your main character Evie, who's also the main character of V for Vendetta, and she's kind of an assistant to the villain. Did you draw from V for Vendetta for this?
No, I actually haven't gotten to read V for Vendetta yet, but now it's definitely on my list. I have to read it. That sounds fantastic. And I think Evie actually came from like evil Evie, like kind of obvious, and probably similar. That I'm like honored that I get to even be in the same realm as that book. That's incredible.
It's an epic. I mean,
I've been
and Natalie
told
Portman in the movie is amazing.
I've been told amazing things, so I have to. That's even higher on my list now.
I was just like,
amazing.
So when you're crafting your villain, because he is morally gray, but you still also want to cheer for him, how did you approach making that balance?
I think that anything can be lightened with humor, and that's sort of the whole tonality of the story, is that like some of these things are like super wild and outlandish, but they're made easier to and more palatable by like how ridiculous it is. Like she walks in the first day and there's severed heads hanging from the ceiling, and she's like, he's in a mood today. Like very like, oh my gosh, that's like so, what a wild way to start off. But it's lightened by the humor, and I sort of think that helps weigh the story in different directions. And also we kind of peel back the layers of the villain as the story goes on, and as the books goes on, it will be similar. We'll peel back layer by layer, like in Shrek, like the ogres and the onions. Similar. Peel it back layer by layer. Ogres have layers, and so do villains.
That's the moral of the story.
That's totally the moral of the story.
And then you have this really fun frog named
Yes.
Kingsley.
Yes.
And from what I understand, he was not in the original book.
Yes.
How did he come about?
So our amazing cover artists, because cover artists are like absolute best. Like they really set up this. They're the thing that reader sees first, right? Elizabeth Turner Stokes, who did the cover, so talented. And I saw it when we were doing developmental edits, and so things were still moving, scenes were being cut, rewritten, and things like that. And me and my editor were like discussing the frog because we were like, I love him, and I was like, I want him to be in the story. And my editor was like, me too. So we like started bouncing off like what his place would be in the story. And from the get-go, I kind of wanted him to be like Salem the cat from Sabrina the Teenage Witch show, like just kind of there to like say something sarcastic and then like, you know, do his thing, or kind of like just absolutely done with everybody's nonsense. So yeah, it was really, like he fell into the story. It was like he was always supposed to be there. It was the easiest, and the round of drafts was super funny because it was like add frog draft round, which was super fun because I just went in and I was like, he fits here, like every pocket he just fell into, and he made the scene so much funnier. So he just absolutely was always meant to be a part of the story, and I'm so happy that like he did. Yeah, and it's all thanks to Elizabeth Turner Stokes, like for creating him and drawing him for me.
So you mentioned Princess Bride,
yes,
and how it's got a little bit of everything in it. How do you approach balancing the action, the romance, the villainy, the all of these little aspects that are in here?
I think that I just try to let what flows naturally flow, and I try, like, because there's so many times like I'm like forcing their heads together and I'm like, kiss, please. But I usually just go with like the flow of the scene, like where it takes me. The humor just sort of always comes in because that's just how I write, and I need that, like, to be able to, like, you know, sometimes scenes are heavy and I think they're always made lighter by like humor and wit. And then the adventure component comes from like the stuff they're doing, and then the romance sort of like falls into the pockets of like what they're doing together, and the tension. Tension's my favorite thing, like slow burn tension, like when their hands brush and I'm like, ah, like screaming because it's so good. Yeah, I think that I just like try to let what flows naturally flow, and I try not to force anything that's not like fitting or working. And it usually ends up working out somehow. Like I'm very, very lucky.
So we had a really big cliffhanger at the end of this book, yes, which we won't go there because we don't do spoilers here. But talk a little bit about the plotting process and knowing with that cliffhanger where you were going to go into book 2.
Oh my gosh. So book 2's like opening sequence, like the first act of book 2, I had planned like in the middle of writing book 1. Like I knew exactly like what was going to happen. So when I wrote that scene, I was like, God, this is like literally been like, I've been planning this scene for like almost 2 years. I'm so excited. And I think that I knew how the book was going to end. I was listening to like a song and seeing the scene like on repeat. And then I just knew exactly how it would flow into book 2. So I'm really excited because a lot of writing book 2, I was like, it's just stuff I've been waiting to like get down to the page because it's been in my head for so long. So it was really exciting, actually.
What did you know about writing at this point that you wish you knew when you started book 1?
This is advice I've gotten from other authors because I'm a baby author. This is my debut novel. I'm still learning so much. So I'm trying to like listen to what everybody else has to say because I still feel like I have so much to learn. And anytime someone asks me for advice, I'm like, I'm still learning too, but this is what other people have told me, which is it's a marathon, not a sprint. There's no rush. It's an up and down process. Some days you'll write a million things, and sometimes you'll write nothing. And some days you'll hate everything you put on the page, and some days it'll be the best thing you think you've ever written. So I think like not being too hard on yourself, and I think that's a good advice for anybody with really anything, not just writing. And I think also never compare yourself to other people. We're all like on a different journey, and we all have like different unique brains, and that's such a wonderful thing. I think that's like the best advice I've been given. And write what you love. Like I think that's another good piece of advice I've been given too.
What can you tell us about book 2 at this point?
Oh my goodness. Well, book 2, we get more of everything. We get more romance, we get more adventure, we get more Kingsley. we get more of everything, more characters. We're expanding on some characters that we didn't really expand upon in book 1 without spoiling anything. We meet some new characters in book 2, and we focus in on some characters we kind of met in book 1, but we didn't like get a whole lot from them. Book 2 is just basically more of everything, like expanding upon everything and expanding upon our world and everything else. Yeah.
And since this is Literary Hype, what books are you hyped about right now?
Oh my God, so many. I just read one of my favorite books by Caven Herning, A Fallen Sword. It was my first book I read like out of drafting book 2, and it was so fantastic. And it's not only like an incredibly like clever and just very well written story. It also, everything that she did in the story, like all the decision, like the big decisions made, she rolled D&D dice to decide like what the next step of the story was. So it was like, I'm like, how did it all like work out so well that like it was such a creatively crafted story? So I absolutely obsessed, and I can't wait for the next one.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with Literary Hype.
so much for coming and saying hi. So nice to meet you.
Thanks again to Hannah for taking time out of her Planet Comicon signing schedule to talk to me. While we were doing this interview, a massive line formed, and we tried to get it in a little gap where she didn't have a line. So that's why we kept it short, just so we did respect the people who were standing right there waiting for her. But if you want to get your hands on a copy of Assistant to the Villain or pre-order Apprentice to the Villain, I highly recommend you do that. Links to do so are in the show description down below. And those links do help the channel, so I highly recommend you using them. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.